All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we coming to you live and from location. Tonight, I'm coming to you live from the truck. I didn't have a chance to make it back home. I was probably a little bit of, I need to do a little bit better time management on my part. I probably should have got out here earlier this morning. I had a windshield wiper motor that was going bad on my truck. And the last time I noticed it was earlier this week. It started raining on me, and the windshield wipers would go up and stop and come up some more and stop and come up some more and stop. And I was like, we expecting rain for the rest of the week. I was like, I better get out here and get that windshield wiper motor changed. Uh, but of course, they don't never make anything easier, and it always looks a little easier than what it normally is, especially if you're doing it yourself. But we got the part ordered and got it in, got that motor swapped out and put on. And like I say, probably about 10 minutes ago, before we came live on the show, I still got oil on I got oil. Yeah, see, yeah, I still got couple of little battle wounds, but we got it taken care of. The life of a independent owner operator. If you can save a couple of dollars by doing something yourself, I highly recommend it. If you don't know how to do it, hey, YouTube University. You can find all kind of stuff on YouTube. If you're not sure, or not 100%, or if you got the tools or the equipment to get it done, you can probably save yourself a couple of bucks. I think to maybe get something like that swapped out, if I went to the dealership, probably would have ran about $800 for the part and the labor and everything else. So, a couple of hours of a little bit of elbow grease and ingenuity, and we got it swapped out and got it taken care of. And please, if anything above a little motor or something like that, if it was something a little bit more complicated, by all means, go get a professional and get them to do it. You don't want to take on if you're not really mechanically inclined, you don't really want to take on those super intricate type jobs. I mean, we ain't trying to swap out transmissions or clutches or anything like that. But some of you guys out there are proficient at doing that thing, and hats off to you, kudos to you. But little old windshield wipers, hey, that's my wheelhouse. We can handle those. But with that being said, and without any further ado, I'm excited for tonight's show. We have our resident economist that's going to be joining us again tonight, Mr. Mike Lampel. He's so gracious enough to come on and grace us with his presence and share some insight with us. Different things are going on. We have all kind of people weighing on one side of whether or not we're going into a recession, whether or not we're going to get a soft landing, whether or not the Fed is going to continue to raise interest rates. How does all that stuff calculate and tie over into our industry? I think that we are kind of like the forerunners, the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, when it comes to the economy. But we can also, take some insight from other people in other industries to kind of prepare and figure out how we need to be conducting ourselves and conducting our business. And that's the reason we bring Michael on to kind of help us kind of prepare, maybe start making sure that we're putting money aside, saving money, paying some debt off, all that good stuff. But before we bring Mike on, I'm going to welcome my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow, to the show. Good evening, Chuck. How are you?
Rico, I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for asking. I was down at the American Truck Historical Society show in Reno, Nevada, from Wednesday till Saturday. These people really put on one hell of a show. There were over 900 trucks there on display. Wow. And you talked about being able to change the motor on the windshield wiper motor. Some of these people had rebuilt these trucks from bumper to mud flap. What the work these people had done, it's mind-boggling. These were the pros of the industry. These were a lot of them were the people that I first met when I came into the industry 50 years ago. This was the people. I got to meet a fellow from Australia, and I was talking to him. He's been driving for 62 years. And I was talking to him, and I said, "Do you know Dean Croak?" And he said, "Yeah, I remember him from some Hullers Association back in Australia, and I sent a picture of the fellow to Dean, and I said, "This guy remembers you from Australia," and he goes, "Is that Max Q? He's a legend." And there were a few more small world stories that I ran into because trucking is such a wonderful, wonderful industry or
I tell you
profession.
what, definitely small world. Small.
Oh
If
yeah.
someone from in the United States is here, actually two people from Australia in the United States, and they both knew each other. I mean, what are the chances of that?
Yeah, you know what? One more small world story before we introduce our or reintroduce our guest, Mike Lampel. I meet a fellow who owns I think his name is Bob. He owns 9 truck dealerships in Minnesota, and he lives in a town called Rochester. And I asked him if he knew somebody, and he goes, "Yeah, I go to church with him." And it's a fellow that I went fishing. I met him at a fishing camp in northern Saskatchewan last summer, and they were good friends. Talk about a small world story.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, wow. Well,
But
I don't want to.
trucking is like that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I want to give a couple more disclosures before I bring Mike on real quick. A couple of housekeepings that I neglected to do a little earlier. Please, by all means, everybody, we need you to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell notification so that you can get notified when we get ready to go live and go on air. You'll get notified. You'll know when we're getting ready to post new information, new content. Also, if you would be so kind, recommend us to some friends. If you find any of this information that we share with you guys tonight, by all means, we humbly ask if you would share the show with some friends, so we can try to help get the show out to a broader audience, get us into the quote unquote YouTube algorithm. We greatly appreciate it if you do so. And with that being said, we're going to welcome in our esteemed guest, Mr. Michael Lampel. Mike, good evening. How are you?
I'm as good as they can get.
Michael, I got to thank you for something. Number one, for coming on the show with Rico and me, but
Don't thank me
you've
yet.
giving some advice to our listeners for about the last 18 months, and it's good, solid advice. They may not have believed it had Rico and I said it, but you said it, and I know for a fact some of our listeners listened to you and avoided taking on extra expense and paid off debt. And I've heard from a few of them that said, "My God, that Mike Lampel saved my ass." Pardon my language. Thank you, Michael, on behalf of a bunch of our listeners, because you gave good, solid advice.
I'm glad. I mean, listen, I'm glad to have the feedback. I mean, sometimes you feel like you're talking into the wind, but I deal with the clients every day, and if you could, if you could save one, you've done a good job.
Yep.
Well,
Exactly.
I tell you what, a lot of I watch CNB. I'm a CNBC junkie. I watch all the different shows. Sometimes just have it on as background noise, and while I'm doing paperwork and stuff at the office. And a lot of the guys on there, you hear some of them. Some you got the Bears, and you got the Bulls, and you got they kind of differ back and forth. Um, about whether or not we're going to actually see a recession, whether or not interest rates are going to be raised. I know personally, just coming from a bit of transparency, a couple of my credit card issuers have taken my credit limits down a little bit. Not they haven't taken them away, but they definitely they bumped me down a little bit on a couple of different different of my business credit cards. Not on my personal, but on my business credit cards, they definitely have bumped me down a little bit on those. So with that being said, Michael, kind of if you rub that crystal ball of yours for us and give us a little bit more insight. Hey, we all can do that. We all
This
see the
could be
same
a
mark.
club for men.
I'm not a lucky leprechaun. I'm really not a lucky leprechaun. I think we are living in a transformative time. In some respects, it's almost as if we're going back to the 1960s from an economy perspective, because what you're seeing is the deglobalization of trade, which is where the Americans were in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, right? Whereby China and Japan were not where they are. Japan was the 1980s, early 90s, then China was early 2000s till now. So I think, for the U.S. is facing a lot of headwinds, and whichever way the U.S. goes, so does the world. I don't care what everybody says, but at the end of the day, whichever way the U.S. goes, so does the world. I think they're going to keep tightening, but it's such a useless thing to do. It's a completely useless exercise to keep raising rates, because the government continues to spend. So you go, like, guys, all you're doing is, you're trying to pour water on a fire that somebody else is just making bigger, bigger, and bigger. So it's like, you're getting nowhere.
Good point.
So you don't think they, by doing this, you don't think that they can help slow down inflation by, because that's what they tell us. That's what they're doing it for. They're trying to slow down the inflation.
No, they're going to raise the inflation is going to get even higher. It's going to get even higher. You're getting the graying of America, like you are in many of the Western worlds, Canada included. You're getting less immigration, right? Contrary to what the news says about the southern border, the people coming over the southern border are $20 an hour and less. So they're doing all the jobs that no Americans want to do.
Right, picking fruits.
Right. Not just that. I mean, even those guys are paid well, by the way. Even those guys are paid well. You got a whole slew of services. So you got in the middle, from manufacturing to trucking to a whole slew of areas. There's just not enough people. And it's not as if they're going to slow down the train. They might derail the train if they keep going.
Because inflation's happening regardless whether they raise the interest rate or not. Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, they're going to raise it till there's a snapping point, right? So they're trying to slow it down.
Which historically has worked, correct, Mike?
Historically, it worked because it worked because the amount of debt wasn't as high as it is now. So historically, you had a balance. I mean, the Americans have a 3.7% unemployment rate, which means you guys are well below full employment. There's like one job. There's like one job for every 0.7 people. So it's like, it's not going anywhere. So they could raise the rates till there's a snapping point, and that snapping point could be a repeat of 2008. Where basically everybody says, "I'm done. I'm cooked." So, I can't see. I mean, look, you guys have a 31, but the debt means nothing. A $31 trillion debt means nothing. That means absolutely zero. But if they keep funding things and funding things and funding things and funding things, the irony is that you're now in this position whereby, even if they slowed down government spending to try and get people to go to work, well, you're already 3.7% unemployment.
Right.
So what about, I know that they were saying, one thing that I picked up on CNBC, they were talking about that they were doing a lot of this stuff, and they were looking for some companies to begin doing some layoffs, and they have some of the big higher tech companies, of course, have done a lot of layoffs. Your Amazons, your Googles, your Facebooks, and stuff like that. They all had a good bit of layoffs, and I think there may be another wave of layoffs coming from a few other big companies. If that was the case, is that going to help out any as well, or is it still going to?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Those people will all have jobs immediately, Mike?
Oh, they'll get jobs immediately. I mean, they're tech. There's so much tech going on. These guys will find jobs. Even as contract workers, they'll find jobs like that, like instantly. They won't be, they're going to go fishing for a couple weeks, come back, and their inbox will be full with a whole lot of contract offers.
Okay.
That won't be a problem. In fact, if anything, the layoffs have done a favor to the tech economy, who up to now had to compete with these guys for these guys. So in a certain way, this is it's not even a rebalancing, because there's so many people in tech. But when your listeners are listening tonight, when they're thinking, what is it? Keep working on keeping tight control of your cash flow, because the the interest component is going to keep rising. Now, unlike Canada, the U.S. has a 25, 30-year fixed mortgage rates. Canada doesn't. So to give you an idea of how bad the debt situation is, Canada's just passed $2 trillion of consumer debt. $2 trillion.
Wow.
We're a country of 37 million.
Wow.
I did read that the majority, it's close to 50%, maybe it's even more, of Canadians own their houses outright.
No.
Not true?
No. And again, it depends on who's owning the houses. And I'm not really worried about the real estate. I
Right.
mean, you're looking now. I mean, guys like us are doing fine. The guys, our kids, are not doing fine.
Right.
Right. But then that's the normal course. When we were their age, we had our own difficulties.
Well, we didn't have, you know what? The only difference is owning a house was within reach, where
Yeah.
you know, I remember when my wife and I bought our first home, it was 1979, and it was $80,000 for that house, 13% mortgage, but we had $20,000 to put down, and we had a tenant in the basement that helped pay the rent, or helped pay the mortgage.
Well, to put it differently, when you bought a house, the house was 2 to 3 times your annual income.
Right.
A house today is about 17 times. The house today is like 17 times annual income. 17.
Big difference.
So the multiplier effect is absolutely astronomical.
So how does this? How would this all affect like bigger companies? Let's say, you know, like manufacturers and things of that nature. Is this gonna produce a slowdown as far as them producing, or are we still just gonna keep chugging along? What do you think on the outlook on as far as?
I think manufacturers are facing a very big problem beyond workers, really big problem, and that's going to be material. Material is going to be a big problem, because one of the things that you know Americans never consider is that to build a sofa or a chair, it's not as if the furniture manufacturer has a forest in the backyard and a leather manufacturer in the backyard and a cloth manufacturer in the backyard and spring manufacturer in the backyard. It's not as if he's got this in the back. So your supply chain, which used to be a lot more global, which means that the sofa manufacturer, as an example, could source springs from China, cloth from Turkey, different places of the world, you know, they could pivot very fast to what suppliers they needed. That's not going to be in the future. In the future, the slowdown will not just come from the labor, it's going to come from the fact that they might just have a problem getting material.
Just like we saw during the pandemic. We saw that all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's still, certain commodities or certain items are still hard to get if they're in demand.
Yeah. I mean, you know, so I think, you know, for the people listening, again, the only thing I could tell them is, like, you got to be very careful that you know, because you brought up an interesting point, Rico, which you said some of the credit card companies were lowering it. Now, interesting part of that is, remember that a credit card is also a demand loan.
Right.
Which means if you had a $10,000 limit, you're running at $16,000, but you know, they're giving you all the, you know, you had a $10,000 limit, you were $10,000, and they suddenly call you up, they say, hey, we need you to bring it down to 6. We're cutting it to 6. We need you to put 4 down now.
Right.
You're SOL if you don't have the 4.
Right.
All of a sudden now you're thrown, okay, you're into collections. We want the money like tomorrow, but you're into collections. All of a sudden it impacts your business all the way across.
And I can see this happening more and more. First of all, if you are in the trucking industry, we are either the darlings of Wall Street or the devils of Wall Street. There's nothing in between. And, you know, the trucking industry has had a good few years and everybody loved us. And now all of a sudden, if you read or look anywhere, it's harder. I'm not going to say dire times, because it's not dire times for everybody, but it's certainly harsher times. Rates are down, capacity is up. So the banks, you know, they know this, and they know that Rico's in the, you know, is in the logistics and trucking sector. So they're saying, well, watch everybody in that sector, and I've seen it before where you could be their best customer in the world, but head office says, watch this sector. This sector is on credit watching. And something that I read the other day, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, that's scary, is all these skyscrapers that are owned, that are, all over, especially the United States, because Canada's a little bit different. But as far as I know, you could shed light on that. But these office buildings that have huge vacancy deficiencies right now, they don't have standard mortgages. These are interest-only loans. And these are loans for like $40 million on a building that's not generating enough money to pay the debt on the interest on $40 million. Most of this is being held by smaller banks. So are we going to see a run on smaller banks now in the U.S.?
It's already started.
We already started.
Well, we had a few, okay. Excuse me. But is there going to be more, do you think?
Oh yeah, by far. Especially, one of the differences between Canada and the world and the U.S. is the U.S. Look, the U.S. has built its entire last 60 years on debt,
Right.
Not just government debt, but corporate debt, real estate debt, whole massive amount of debt. And real estate was one of those underpinnings of all that debt. So they're watching it very closely because we're talking like several $1 trillion of real estate debt, especially commercial. And and a lot of that, by the way, unlike Canada, a lot of that is owned by regional banks.
Right.
So a lot of that debt is regional banks, like a local shopping mall or a 20-story complex. It could be a regional bank in Atlanta,
right,
Rico. So the good news, and I want to tell something. The good news to the Americans is this bizarre idea of $250,000 of account protection is gone. They'll just cover it all. So you guys don't have to run to the bank. The government's already said, whatever your deposit is, we're covering it. Don't worry about it. Right? So at least that bizarre notion is gone.
Right.
At the same time, though, it causes a ripple effect through other ways, because when that regional bank it now faces a big problem at the bottom line, because it might have 10, 15, 20% of its commercial loans have gone sour. They start clamping down on everybody else.
Of course.
right.
So remember, I said this before to everybody before on the show. You're no longer just watching your client. You're watching your client's clients.
Yep. So I want to say this too, for everybody that's listening in or watching us. You can interact with us. If you got a question, type it into the chat, and we'll make sure we try to highlight your question, especially if you're on Facebook or if you're on YouTube. You can type your question into the chat box, and we should be able to see it on our end, and we'll try to highlight it. Mike, I've got a question that I wanted to, and also if you see my truck start shaking or anything, I'm in the loading dock right now. Like I said, I'm coming to you guys live, from location. So if you see the truck start shaking or anything like that, it's not an earthquake or nothing like that. They just loading my trailer. Yeah. So. I really, and just to kind of lend a little credibility to the show, I really do this for in real life. It's just not.
That's right. Ladies and gentlemen,
I don't wake up
Rico's
and
not
do a podcast. I actually do this for real.
Just so you know, ladies and gentlemen, Rico's not an undercover boss show because he owns JB Hunt. He doesn't own JB Hunt.
Not at all. Not at all. I do this for real. So, but
this is not an undercover boss segment.
But with that being said, Mike, so a lot of things that we kind of talked about before previously to kind of insulate yourself to prepare for tougher times. You want to try to. I've heard, and so I'm gonna bounce this off of you. You want to have a relationship with a local bank, a regional bank, or credit union, regional bank, local bank, and one of the big major banks. You want to try to have you kind of like a three-legged prong approach, so that you can kind of have those relationships in place with each one of those different kind of institutions, so that you can kind of help insulate you a little bit to the whims if you get into a spot where you need to have a partner or something like that to be able to float yourself through a tougher time. What do you say to that type of approach? Is that a solid approach to have, or that
Well, what
that
you're saying is like
nonsense?
if I run out of money, these guys are going to be money. No,
Yeah.
they ain't going to give you money. We have an old saying in Canada: banks are really good at giving you an umbrella when it's sunny and taking it away when it's raining.
True.
Right. So I think, look, it's one of those things where if I was one of the guys here, I'd say, okay, let me set up a couple lines of credits, but I'll leave one line of credit I won't even
Right.
touch. I won't like what I will do is take first off, take $100 out of it, because if there's no activity in it, they'll shut it down.
Yes.
So take $100 or $1,000 out of it. Even if you put it back into the bank, pay them their interest, because as long as there's activity in it, they'll keep it there. So almost like a credit card,
Absolutely.
keep it there. Now, it's good to have the line of credit versus the credit card, because we both know the interest spread is actually massive.
Right.
It's absolutely huge, right? So you want to have one of those rainy day lines of credits, which says, here it is. If it's a $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 line credit, have it, but never touch it. Just take $400 or $500 out of it and just keep it there. I think also the smart thing to do, I know I've learned that from Chuck many times. Chuck has always been a very smart guy at seeing value, is if there are things you can pre-buy when times are good, pre-buy them. Like a tire.
Right.
Like tires are one of those things you're going to need, right? So if you got that extra cash flow at that time, so maybe I should stock up on like a set of tires and keep them somewhere, because if I need them, I really don't want to have no money and then I need to replace a set of tires.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great subject. When you talk about tires, I talked about before, because everything is relationships in our business, in the business of logistics. Relationship. So I say get you a relationship with a local tire company. Get in there and get to know the people that are there, and you may be able to find a good deal if they do swap outs, especially on big fleets or something like that. If you can buy great used tires that are first line, that are not blemished or nothing like that, not recaps or nothing like that. They're virgin tires. But sometimes, because I run super singles on my trailers, fleets will swap out a whole line of trucks or trailers with super singles, and I can pick up a brand new super single with hardly any wear on it for like $250. So brand new. If I were to go buy a Michelin super single brand new, those things are $1,000 a pop.
Yeah.
So I've been able to create the relationships that when my local, I got a couple of different places that I know these guys on first name basis. I'll take them out to lunch or something like that, maybe once a quarter, and they'll give me a call. Hey, got some super singles in. You interested? You need anything? And if I need something, I go and snatch them up. If I don't, then no harm, no foul. But I'm on that kind of like that list to be able to save money. You got to find different ways in this business. Like I said, I swapped out a windshield wiper motor. You got to be able to save something, especially right now in these days and times. You got to be able to save money. A dollar saved is a dollar earned, as they say.
100%.
Yeah. And and one of the other things that look, there are a lot of tricks. Technology, as I said before, can be a big boost to you guys. And one of the things is, a lot of the guys, Gmail is the most widely used system there is. But the interesting part of Gmail is a lot of people don't realize is it's got a lot of programmable features in it. So you can actually set up your own marketing system out of Gmail that you could say to Gmail, if it was me, right? If I was me and I was in your position, Rico, which is a smaller operator versus Chuck's Traffics, which is a much bigger operator, and he's got marketing people and all these people. But if it's a smaller operator, I would research who my top clients, suppliers, and clients are, and I'd get to know them.
Great.
I would get to know them, right? Because if I'm going to be in Atlanta and I know that my supplier in Chicago has a supplier in it, and my client in Chicago has suppliers in Atlanta, I'd contact that guy and say, listen, I'm heading back to Chicago. Anything you want me to take with you?
Yeah.
Right.
I just happen to be going back to your client. Is there anything you want me to take back?
Absolutely.
100%.
Right. And the funny part is, you guys don't realize this, but you've got the marketing information in front of you if you just look at the waybill, because there's the company.
A lot of times, and the thing about it is, and this is something that we talk about on the show a lot as well. You gotta don't be afraid of hearing no. And a no a no today is not necessarily a no tomorrow. Sometimes you have to understand and learn, like you said, Michael, as far as marketing goes, you got to be consistent. A lot of times that first phone call may not be able to be the one that's going to get your foot in the door, but kind of put it on a schedule. Put it on a schedule to make sure that you are touching them again and again. Maybe put it on a schedule once every month, once every 3 months. What do you suggest, Michael?
The law of three. The law of three in marketing says they have to hear from you 3 times, and then you're ingrained in their brain. They just have to hear from you 3 times. 1-888-555-1212. That's why they say the phone number is 3 times in commercials.
Yeah.
Because it's very simple, guys. If you simply phone the guy, say, "Hey, Rico, yeah, it's so and so. I'm going back up to your client. I'm leaving tomorrow. Is there anything you want me to take with me?" And here's the way it works. As much as Rico just said now, if you could take 5-10% savings on your overall equipment, overall supplies you need. Well, if you got a system that's costing you like $100,000 to keep it running, and you take 10% off, that's $10,000. If you just phone these guys 3 times when you're in town, you give them your contact number. If an express shipment comes up, you'll make up the other 10% in express rates to go back. And the funny part is, I got to tell you something about human behavior. Humans are lazy in nature. So I know they like to shop around for rates, but believe it or not, if you phone the guy 3 times and he gets to remember you, he will actually call you even if it's more expensive. Why? Because he could be swamped that day and didn't get a chance to go on the boards to find another load.
Right. Right. You never do.
He'll say, "Hey, I'll call Rico. Rico, you in town today?" "I am." "Listen, you got to go back to Chicago. I got something for you. I'll give you $400 for the skid." "I'll take it."
Yeah, good point. And that's why it's so important. We tell our listeners all the time, run a lean. The worst thing, and I spoke to so many people this weekend, and there were a lot of very, very successful people at that show. That's why they can afford hundreds of thousands of dollars to rebuild these trucks, or to buy some of them, to buy these trucks. And if you talk to 90% of them, they're not out there chasing the spot market. There's something they do. They run a lane or a commodity, and it is the secret. And it's no secret, but that's the way to success. Now, Mike, I got to ask you something. Maybe things have changed. I always saw it with a line of credit. The bank likes you. They want you to use it because they're bored. Like, let's just say not even $100,000 line of credit, because most of our listeners will maybe be at 50, but you have a $50,000 line of credit. My understanding from the bank, the bank we used to deal with many years ago, was the bank goes out and borrows that money from its clients, from the people it borrows money from, to lend to you. They want to see, if you have a $50,000 line of credit, they want to see you go up to 50 and then pay it back. They want that constant velocity, because that puts them, if you have a $50,000 line of credit and you're always at $49,000, that's not really what a line of credit is for. That's a bank loan.
Well, no, that tells them you got a problem.
Right.
Right. But as long as you're paying your interest, they're going to leave you alone.
But if you're paying it back, and they don't expect all 50 to be paid back, but they certainly, I believe, or the way it was explained to me, they certainly expect, if you have a $50,000 line of credit, they love to see it drop down to 10 or 20 and then go back up to 50 or 49 and then back down and then back up. They want to see that velocity.
Yeah, because that's risk mitigation to them, right? That's for them a reduction of risk. So, but if it stays at 49 and you're paying the interest, they'll leave you alone. But remember, that interest is just eating away your cash flow.
Right, but they do get worried.
That's dead money.
Yeah, that's when they get worried, when they're picking on the trucking sector that week, and they look and they go, well, this guy is always at 49. He's got a $50,000 line of credit. He's always at 49. Yeah. Well, let's bring him in here. We got to see about cutting this line because it never gets under.
Yeah.
They can try. Go ahead.
And the biggest thing that kind of wanted to kind of touch on this a little bit on in depth a little bit more as well too, because a lot of times like people may wonder, well, why would you need business credit cards? Why would you do a line of credit? And I humbly suggest that and Michael, if you know a little bit about this, you can help kind of help demystify this and explain this. We've talked about this before just a little bit, but it's having a line of credit or a business credit card, even a credit card. A line of credit is much better, but a credit card is better than running your accounts receivable or your through factoring company.
That Chuck knows that cold. Chuck's the one who talks about it. That's the cost of money on that.
The interest rate that you get, and sometimes a lot of people think that, oh well, I'm only paying 5%. I'm only paying, but they don't realize that's not an annualized APR.
It's monthly. It's 5%. Now most of them. Now I think they back up, but I know there's one company. And I guess I can say their name on the air. It doesn't matter. They've held firm at 5%, as far as I know, for many years. But there's a bunch of services they do offer. It's non-recourse, so when you sell it, you sell it. But that works out to close to somewhere between 45 and 60% a year, ladies and gentlemen. There's not one trucker that's ever listened to this show in the history of Rates and Lanes that makes 60%.
So I want people to understand that that is literally a death of 1,000 cuts, because what that is if initially in your mind you don't think, hey, this is not too bad. 5% is not too bad, and if you're not watching it and you don't understand how that number works, like I say, you're dying a slow death of 1,000 cuts. They are just literally bleeding you out, and you don't. And you ever get into a position where you say, man, I know I'm generating revenue. Where's all my damn money going?
That's where it's going, Rick.
Well, that's one of the places where it's going. I mean, look, no, I'm not against the factoring companies, so long as the person who's doing it, right? If at the end of the day, he's trying or she's trying to, you're really. So it's nice, honey. As you can tell, I got an audience. Thank you, honey. Ellie, I'm on. So if he's got control of their cost, right? If they understand their cost, and they say, okay, if my 5% is going to cost me $1,000, right? The question is, this month, did I do something to reduce did I get my $1,000 back somewhere else? Did I do it by buying truck tires ahead of time? It's an arbitrage thing, right? But Rico, you're right, which is if you don't know what your costs are, if you got no control of your cost factors at all, you got interest payments here, interest payments there, then you're right, you're dead. You're just sinking.
And the thing that a lot of people have gotten themselves in trouble with, Michael, and I don't know if there's, and if you know of anything, suggestion maybe for someone out there, a lot of people that may have jumped into the industry, they might have bought equipment. They might have went out and bought. If they came within the last 2 years, I know they overpaid for their equipment, and they may be in a situation where they paid $150 to $100,000 for a used piece of equipment that probably today is probably only worth about $40,000 or $50,000. They're upside down, and I don't know any suggestions on a situation like that, or they kind of they stuck with that, and they got to find a way to pay that off.
Well, no, their problem is not paying it off. Their problem is how much debt are they carrying on that. So it doesn't really matter if they pay $200,000 or $100,000. The question is, what's the debt factor on it, right? Because if they own it outright, okay, it's worth less, but they don't have a monthly payment they got to make. But if they do have a monthly, and again, it also goes to how old is the truck? In other words, is it like 5,000 miles away from a whole set of new tires at $1,000 a piece, or is it 50,000 miles away from a whole new set of tires?
$50,000. If that's right around the corner.
And brake job and everything else.
Yeah, guys, I got to tell you that from what I've seen and what I saw, I would have to say that 90% of the new entrants into the for hire sector got into it because they used factoring companies. Because growing up in this industry before factoring was very common, you would save up money, and you would know, depending on the work you were doing, you would have to have as much as $100,000 earmarked to put a new truck on the road to cover um, your fuel, driver cost, and that's not to buy the truck. That was to finance the work that truck was going to generate, knowing that you had 30 to 45 days to wait until the time you got paid. Meanwhile, you had to pay for your driver, you had to pay for your truck payment, repairs, maintenance, and fuel. Okay, so that's where the 100 grand came from. But that was money that you saved up and reinvested into your company. Where today we don't have that. We have people that don't know what the hell they're doing. Went to a factoring company who's lending them money on the receivables at a high interest rate, and they're never going to get ahead.
No, and that's exactly it. I mean, that's why you guys are in a cash flow business,
Right.
and and right now I think what's going to happen. But again, it's an interesting twist because also the trucking industry is in this really interesting dilemma too, aging population. So what they're doing is they're lowering the standard of drivers to get into the business, right? Because the
Yeah.
people getting into the business look at the nominal dollars, not the rate of return dollar, right? The
Right.
people getting into the business don't have the education. Let's say in a normal world they'd never be able to make $100,000 on their own in another type of job. They say, "Man, I'll become a trucker. I'll make $100,000." Meanwhile, they're looking at the nominal dollars. They're not looking at the rate of return. And I think what you guys are talking about tonight, which I think is a great thing, and there should be more, is like, okay, how do we squeeze profit out of this dollar? What are the things we got to do to squeeze profit out of this dollar? These people are not looking at it. That's why, when you see immigrants or new Americans, new Canadians coming in and they take the corner grocery job, understand that but my parents did too. When we came to Canada, my parents took a corner grocery job 364 days a year, 9 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night, 364 days a year for the first 7 years, right?
Yeah.
And that's because as immigrants, we come in, we look at the nominal dollar. So for us, time is not a factor. Immigrants are not looking for a 9 to 5 job where they make a 95. No, they're saying, I need income. Oh, that's big income. Yes, I got to work 17 hours a day. I'll do it. And they look at trucking the same way, and they say nominal dollars, I'll do it. So there's a lot of people take advantage of people who overpay for truck, people who will get shafted on factoring. There's all this going on, and it's only going to get worse.
It is.
It's only just going to get worse.
I totally agree. And the one thing I want to add to that, I'm not against factoring, okay, ladies and gentlemen. So if you listen to me, I'm not anti-factoring, but factoring should be used like
Smartly.
bridge financing almost. It's emergency when and there are some times where you'll have a really good paying customer, and it's a good customer, but because of their intricacies, it may take 45 or 60 days to get paid, but they pay very, very well, and you can afford to pay that 2.5% or 3% or 4% off of each invoice, okay, which is huge. So if you're talking a $10,000 invoice for a heavy haul, at 5%, you're talking $500 to the factoring company per month.
Actually, Chuck, you just raised a really good point. And I think anybody listening should listen to what Chuck just said. He says, if you got a stack of paper that's got to get sold, start analyzing each client from their credit rating perspective, and tell the factoring company, look, I got 30 grand I got to sell to you, and you want to give me 5 points. But I tell you what, out of that 30,000, I got this one $10,000 guy here who's AA+ credit rating. So I don't want to take 5% on this. I'll take 2.5%, because this one you're going to get paid on. We know that. This one, on the other hand, is a different category. Again, you squeeze out 0.5 point, 3/4 point. You squeeze that out. But I think that's a good point, Chuck, which is you should sell your factoring by the credit quality of your client.
Right.
One of the biggest issues that we have, and this is probably definitely a Hank Seaton question or something to get his opinion on. We got to get Hank back on soon. I think I know Chuck said you tried to reach out to him, but the thing about that I was going to say is that we don't in trucking. A lot of times we kind of get these draconian contracts where we don't negotiate very well. We just kind of take whatever it is that they give us. We just kind of just, okay, we bend over and grab our ankles and take it. And that's not necessarily the best, that's not the best way to conduct business. But a lot of times, and I bring these things up, I say these things on the podcast because unfortunately, people in our industry are not the most sophisticated. And that's not a knock on us as truckers. We just, a lot of us, hey, we're just out here trying to do, quote unquote, do a job. And we haven't made the transition from understanding that that the job that we're doing is actually a business, and as a business, as an entrepreneur, we have to have a different mindset shift from job to business and understanding the difference. Yep. And those two are not the same. So we have to understand that we have to take off the job hat and put on the business hat and understand how to conduct business when it comes to taking care of what it is that we need to take care of as far as our keeping our company afloat.
Rico, you're right on the money, and I'll add to that the fact that as far as owner-operators go, they're 95% of them get into this business either from the trucking end because they were a truck driver, or they work in maintenance. That's 95%. 5% may be people that have done other jobs or came from there or were actual business people. That's 5%. But the 95 have not had a lot of business training. They've been employees their entire life, and it's a hell of a big step going from being an employee to being self-employed. And that's why, and I'm not just picking on trucking, I'm talking about
anything, any business. If you don't have,
that's why we have such a huge failure rate. Yeah, is because people, everybody wants to own their own business because you can get to call the shots. Yeah, you get to call the shots, but you also have to be. You're the guy that has to take responsibility and accountability for everything, and a lot of people aren't willing to do that.
Huge point.
Well, I'm going to add to that. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike. No, go ahead.
Chuck, I was just going to make a comment. When you own your own business, you're the one calling the shots, and you're the one taking the shots.
You got it. Yes.
And you're the one getting shot. You're the one getting shot.
Yes, because there's nobody in front of you that's protecting you. You've got your head. You got your head right out there. That's what happens.
Yeah. And in real life, just a moment of transparency, real life situation. I probably could open the door and show you guys. Last week or a week and a half ago, somebody backed. I'm in the dock at my customer unloading, and I'm in the beds, kind of taking a nap. And of course, if you've drove a truck, you know how it sounds. Truck shakes violently. Boom! You hear the crunch. Oh, what's going on? Yep. Somebody backed into my truck on my driver's side. It's about $15,000 worth of damage done to my truck. Oof. Now, of course, we have insurance and all that stuff. The guy stopped. We got his information. Got all that stuff. But now, I'm in the process of ordering parts to try to make sure that the parts get in to repair my truck. But when my truck is going to be going down to get repaired, that's 2 weeks that they estimating that my truck is going to be. They're going to need it to do the repairs. That's a me problem. And yeah. And what I'm saying, why am I saying that? You have to make the shift from business, job. My customer, that's not their problem. No. Because my truck got backed into, that my truck's going to be down. So I have to have a relationship already set up to be able to provide either get me a rental truck to be able to continue to service my customer, because it doesn't take but a second. Doesn't take but a second to lose a customer. It's hard as hell to gain a customer, but if you can't continue to service, and that's what I mean by making the transition from, you can't just think always as a as okay, I'm doing the job. Like I said, you got to think from the business standpoint.
Mhm.
If JB Hunt, and we were joking about them earlier, if JB Hunt had this issue, they got so many damn trucks there, they can just put somebody, they can move somebody else over there.
Yeah,
So
of course.
us as independents, as owner operators, we have to get those. We have to find out what it is that we got to do to get relationships with the different rental companies in our area. How can we establish credit? How can we establish a relationship with them so that when these things come up and arise, that we got some type of way. Our truck has to go in the shop sometimes. We got to, and if we got a customer service, if we're not scheduling it around a vacation or something like that, we got to be able to continue to provide service without fail to our potential clients.
Now I'm going to give you guys a trick. Again, I talk about technology, cheap technology, and then we talked about this several months ago, and I said to everybody, you got to know your input costs. You got to know every single penny. And the funny part is, everybody has this little device called a cell phone. Right. So I'll tell you how I keep track of my expenses every day. Every time I spend $1, I email myself. So whatever I'm spending it on, I go, okay, went to lunch, $6.55. Went to lunch with this client, $17.32. And what I do is I simply look at my emails and I go, okay, there it is. Same thing. If you're out on the road, if you're going to spend money, just email it. Then just sit down at the end of the week and just total your emails. Give it the same title all the time so you can find it all the time. And say,
actually, and have it called expense. You know what? To make it simpler for our listeners, expenses at Joe's expenses at Outlook.com or at gmail.com. So you have a separate email address for your expenses.
It's free. Yeah, and by the way, just so you know, every Gmail account comes with Google Apps that are free.
Right.
So you could create a spreadsheet, the whole thing. And look, I know it sounds mundane to a lot of people, and it is mundane. But at the end of the day, if you don't know what that client is costing you, and you don't, then go use the factoring company, because why not? They'll slice your head off, and you're just basically, you're selling your services for $1. You're earning 97, 96, 95, 94, 93, 92. Sell at 80.
Michael, and we're all guilty of it in business.
Sure, of course we are.
We can't, when we don't do the proper analytics and we get caught up in the volume, we lose ourselves. And I remember many years ago when our son Doc joined the company, and I had this one customer that used to make shampoo and soap and body lotions and stuff like that, and in the Toronto area. And they would sometimes on Friday nights, they would tie up 6 or 7 of our city trucks while they finished making the product. Well, we'd have 20 trucks waiting, 20 trailers waiting at the dock to finish loading. And this was all the time. And my son came in, one of the first things he did was, at this point, these people were giving us about $3 million a year in partial load business. And he looked into it, he did a deep dive, and he came back and he said, Pat, this account's got to go. I said, are you out of your mind? That's $3 million a year. He said, we will make more money without them. And you know what? He was right on the money. If we were turning $3 million a year, it was costing us 3.3 to keep the account because of all the other expenses. And you've got to be willing to, we get caught up and we get emotionally attached to clients because the volume is so good. You got to take a hard look.
Do you remember, sorry to interject because I know we're coming around, but I just want to remind everybody, about a year ago, I said to everybody, if somebody's really cheap in a lane and the client calls you and says, are you willing to do it for 75 cents? You're making more money by saying no.
Yes. Agreed.
Let the other sucker take it for 75 cents. I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Well, if you have to take a loss on the back haul and you can't make enough on the front haul, you got to pick another lane. It's not doable. And this happens. Unfortunately, your back haul is somebody else's front haul and vice versa.
We got a little bit of time left. We got about 5 minutes left in the show. Let's stay on that subject for a quick second while we're here. Can you, Chuck, while we got you, can you break that down a little further? explain that a little bit more as far as how can you justify if you're running a dumbbell, if you're running a lane, making it make sense to on the backhaul. If can you kind of break that down a little bit more?
Your trucks are stupid, okay? They're trucks. They're not people. They're machines. You have different costs going to different places. If you have a customer that's giving you loads from, I'm going to use this as a bad example, but from Ohio, middle of Ohio to New York, and they're giving you $6 a mile, because of tolls and congestion, and it may take you a while to get in there and get your delivery, and so you'll be paid, extra. And your backhaul from New York or New Jersey, wherever you're loading back up, may very well pay you $1 a mile, or 75 cents a mile even. So you just do your math, you add it all together, you average out how much you're getting on the round trip, and then you've got it. And then you really have to get out your pencil and pen or your calculator and add up every single expense, including your road tolls and your expenses. You need to know what your expenses are, and expenses are more than fuel, ladies and gentlemen. You also have to consider, if you're running your own trucks, how much tires cost. Because you go buy a brand new truck and you may get 200,000 miles out of tires if you take care of them. But even that engine, it's going to need replacing. You have to put money away in a rainy day fund for maintenance of that truck, including the engine. And the best people go to take Penske or Ryder or Pack Lease, take what their rental cost is and add more on it. Because remember, those people are buying thousands of trucks at a time, and they've got great big shops. They've got the economies of scale. They buy truckloads of filters. You buy one or two. So they get them a whole lot cheaper. So if Ryder tells you they want 20 cents a mile for maintenance, you can be rest assured yours is about 30 or 35. And then you've also got to take, and I've seen a lot of truckers do this, take into consideration your tolls. That's another one, and other expenses, and how long it takes. If you're running an area like from Wyoming to Montana, it's pretty wide open. But if you have to go through Chicago or Newark, New Jersey, you're not going to make the same time as somebody that's running
or I-95 in Philadelphia these days.
Well, there's a great example, isn't it? What do you do when you're delivering? Well, you're going to take the detour like the 10,000 other trucks an hour.
Yep.
That's going to make deliveries
This is going to be
a whole lot more expensive.
For months. It's going to be for months like this. I think tonight, the theme of tonight, which I think was a good show for everybody, I was like, okay, guys, here's how you can make some more money, and here's how you can save more money. And if you don't know this stuff by now, and if you don't want to do it, then don't do it. But you know what? Hope you can hold your breath underwater, because you're going to be underwater fast.
Yeah.
So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking at the time. We've coming up on that, and I tell you, just perfect time. And they came out. They brought me my paperwork. I've gotten loaded. I've gotten the windshield wiper motor changed out on the truck. We ready to roll, man.
Rico, I gotta ask you a question, my friend. What are you worried about windshield wiper motors? Have you ever heard of a product called Rain-X?
Oh no. These past couple of weeks, we've been getting these sporadic torrential downpours down this way. It hadn't been raining all day, but it'll come in spurts, and it's almost like tropical storm.
Come on, Rico, just stick your head out the window. It's not going to mess your hair.
Guys, I got to just share something with you, and it's in my past. At one point, I had a Jaguar. It was actually a really good car. It was an '86 Sovereign, and I put 420,000 miles on that car, and the dealer could not believe it. But the last few years of that car's life, it needed a lot of money. And one of the things it did need was a new windshield wiper motor. It wasn't gone, but it was going. So I just put Rain-X on it once a week, so I never had to use my wiper motor.
No, and here lately, the scales on my route, they've been opening up at some really crazy times, and I don't want to have to explain anything to that man.
I get it. No, Rico, I totally, not only do I get it, I respect it, because that's how you really run a business.
But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, want to Michael, let the folks know if they got a question for you, if they want to get a hold of you, or just want to shoot you, pick your brain even further. How can they get a hold of you?
Well, first I have to find my brain. Michael.lampel@gmail.com, Lampel. Happy to answer any questions on tech, marketing, or finance, whatever, you just want to, say, listen, am I crazy? Whatever, just shoot me an email. I'll be happy to answer the questions. I'm always around to give away free advice, because that's exactly what it's worth. Nothing.
Damn good advice, Mike. Don't undersell it.
Chuck, my friend, let the people know how they can get a hold of you.
Yes, best way these days, send me an email at my new email address and include your phone number, and I will call you back. And it's chucksnow280@outlook.com.
Well, we appreciate it, Michael. Once again, thank you for taking the time out to bless us with a lot of great insight, taking time out of your schedule to come on. You're so gracious with your time. We definitely are always eternally grateful for you doing so. So we want to thank you again for taking the time out. Ladies and gentlemen, we want you guys to, by all means, stay safe out there, stay healthy. Keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise. And God willing, we'll talk at you same time, same place next week. God
Safe travels, Rico. Safe travels, my friend.
Catch you on the flip-flop. Be safe out there, bud.